Hi everyone, today I want to share with you how I'm mixing greens with the Sennelier Botanical Watercolor set by Billy Scholl, which I have here on my right. And so I'm trying to have a wide perspective here, just so you get to see how I'm mixing the colors. So it might not be as close as I usually like to film, but maybe later when I'm doing detailing I might zoom in. So I'm going to use my Princeton Heritage watercolor brush, and this is the round number 5, just because I don't want it to be too realistic, and I won't take too much time on it, but I do want to show you the aesthetics of a botanical watercolor painting. So over here I've got my water jar and a tissue. So some people like to use cloths. I like to use disposable tissues because I don't like dirty cloths, and I don't think you can wash them because they're probably, the colors would stay in other things, I don't know. But anyway, I'm using soft Kleenex tissues, so that's not going to damage my brush. And I'm going to start by mixing up a lovely and juicy green. So these are geranium foliage, so the leaves, and I really like how they look because they have that sort of, they're different ones. So if you are not familiar with what I'm talking about, go online and Google some images, but I've taken some pictures from my garden, and so that's what I'm going to do today. These are very juicy and green and bright, so I'm going to mix up lemon green with some phthalo blue. I'm going to make a little petal over here. I've been using a porcelain palette, or a plate rather, from IKEA, but and it's really good, but really for the purpose of this video I decided to go back to the metal tin lid or mixing palette. So as you can see, this is a little bit too much, so I'm going to neutralize it with a little bit of Queen Gold, which has now taken it to like a mustardy color. And then I'm going to go into the ultramarine, and that's given us a little dark color, like a forest green. And I'm going to go back into the lemon yellow and lighten it up. There are different ways of mixing greens, and you might get to a color like this a lot faster by mixing less colors, but I kind of like to see how my color develops, and sometimes I take real long time to mix them, and when I get to the perfect color, that's when it's good. And because with botanical art you're not going to use just full-on color, what happens is you can mix quite a few pigments and it's not going to look muddy because it's going to be quite diluted. So I'm going to start off by basically glazing the petal. So I'm looking at an angle and I'm making sure that the entire leaf is nice and shiny and has this beautiful water glaze over it, because it does dry out, and when it does, you'll have hard edges. So I'm going to go into this lovely green we mixed up, and I'm going to strategically put it in the darkest areas of the petal. So looking at the picture, the darkest areas are round about here, like so. So these are the darkest, and then while it's at this stage I'm going to go in and quickly mix up a slightly lighter color. So I'm going to go into this lemon green, take it up here. As you can see, I'm just going to drop this color all everywhere in between, so I don't want white areas. This is going to be more of a loose kind of illustration because I want it to be quick. But if you wanted to perfect it, you'd have to do obviously every single line quite mindfully. So that is for the first layer. While it's drying, we're going to do the stalk, and I'm going to do that again by glazing, just with clean water, and that is actually quite a bit more yellowy. We're looking at the photograph, and I'm going to go in and let the color flow. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm making less videos, it's because my son is now skipping his nap times, which is the time I used to, well, the time I really could do videos. He had daily naps, and now it's more the case of, you know, when I'm lucky, if I'm lucky, he might have a couple of days a week where he naps, like has short naps, or nothing at all really. So yeah, I think the days of long naps have long gone, so I'm patiently waiting for when he'll start nursery later this year. Okay, so I'm going to move on to this stalk here as well while I'm at it, and I've got the color ready, and I'm going to leave it at that for now. I'm going to repeat the same thing on this petal. Okay, so I also went over with a heat gun, so that's why the page curled up, but once it will cool down, it will flatten out. So for those of you who find it quite useful to know what paper I'm using, this is the Stillman and Byrne sketchbook, and this is the hard cover wire bound, I think it's called. And yeah, the actual paper is the Beta series, so it's the extra heavyweight, so you can have a look. It is actually 270 GSM, and it's cold pressed. It has very light texture, so if you don't like too much texture, then I think you will like this paper. So let's move on. So I'm going to do second glaze. And for a second glaze, I'm going to be a little bit more directional with where I'm placing the colors. So I'm going to first of all start mixing up the colors, and I'm going to have another little play here with my mix that I already have from before. I'm going to take a little bit of quinacridone gold, and I'm going to make sure this time I don't put too much. I'm just making sure you can see it. Not putting too much in, so you can see if I don't put too much in, it makes it a very nice neutralized green. So I think this is actually perfect green for what I want. And then I'm also going to mix up a nice kind of yellowy green over here with possibly the same, yes, that works really well. So with that mix that I already have there, I'm just going to dilute it slightly more, and I think I'm quite happy with it. So now I'm going to apply the second glaze, but it's not going to be the same kind of style as I did before. So this time I'm going to go straight in, and I'm going to make sure I avoid this veining on the on the petals and go around it, because that will make a nice effect. So now, after placing the color, I washed out my brush, and I'm just going to make sure I avoid having a hard edge. So I'm just going to take it around like so. Keep on washing the brush. I take it a bit more out, that way it looks quite nice and natural. So I'm going to zoom in just for a second so you can see what I'm doing here. So that's the difference of the first one. So the next one I'm going to do the same. So I'm looking at my picture and I can see that there is this other area that has the same darkening. So I'm going to go in and place the dark watercolor in there, wash my brush out, and with a clean and dry brush I'm just going to move it out. But be careful, because the brush will, the bristles are going to move them, move the watercolor, so make sure you clean it out. Also, to avoid cauliflower, as they call it, make sure you don't use too much water, because it's going to make the watercolor spread. So let's go into another area, which is around about here, and this is where you can be more precise. So the first one you don't need to be, and you can sort of correct it with your second one. So I'm just going to do like so, and then once again with a nice clean brush I'm just going to soften the edges like so, and don't wait for too long because they will start drying, and pull it onto the rest of the petal to intensify the depth of it. So hopefully you can see that it's starting to become a little bit more dimensional and a little bit more interesting than it was before. So then there is a little bit of darkness each side of the veining over here, and then I can see some darkening here as well, like so. Okay. So I'm going to cover this yellow that went into from the stalk into the petal, and normally that of course you wouldn't let happen in a botanical painting, but you can correct it if you need to. You still have the time to do that. I'm going to actually bring this lovely green over this yellow again, just to take that yellow slightly more down. Looking at it, I've got some shadow here, and actually a little bit on here as well. Same thing, clean your brush and go back in. So I'm going to leave it at this, and I'm going to move on to the next one. And I hope you can see how easy I'm doing this. So you don't have to, if you want to try botanical art, you don't really have to go into the major projects where it takes you hours. You can still do something achievable. So I've got this, kind of looking for a dirty green. I think this is actually a good color that's already on my palette, and I can see that there is a shadow on the stalk that is caused by the leaf itself. So I'm going to try and place this shadow and then just take it out like so. Also I'm going to take some of this green that we used just before, and I'm going to put it just on the side right here, just pulling it down all along the stalk. You probably can't see it, but then I'm going to soften the edge like so, and that is it. So that, hopefully you can see if I zoom out, we went from this sort of flat looking yellowish stalk to a little bit more realistic one, just by adding a little bit of darker line on the side and creating some sort of dimension. And that darkness, now I can see it needs to go further down, so I'm just going to put it right here like so. Okay, so I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other leaf, and then I'll come back. So I had to do this off camera because my battery died, but basically I have taken platinum carbon ink fountain pen in extra fine, and so here's the finished geranium foliage leaves, and this is a very quick way of putting something nice looking into your journal without really spending that much long time. And yeah, so I think the added value of using a fountain pen is the edging, because you don't need to be so precise with the watercolor for this type of illustration. You can just at the end give the texture by just sort of wiggling the line as you go, and that makes it look a little bit more natural rather than just a smooth straight line. As petals and leaves, they all tend to have some sort of texture to the edges. So this is it. If this was obviously classic botanical illustration, you would not use the fountain pen, and you would go on building a couple more layers and use the watercolor and the highlights instead of a fountain pen to translate the real look to paper. But like I said, this is super fun, it's super easy, and it gives your watercolors a good play, and I've enjoyed mixing these greens. That's the point, and yeah, thanks for watching and see you soon.